This year will mark the 106th year since the end of the world's first most significant armed conflict, known as World War I. But did you know that in some parts of France, World War I never indeed came to an end? Welcome to today's video that uncovers the lasting impact of World War I on northern France, known as the Zone Rouge or Red Zones. What was the reason behind the creation of these red zones? Keep watching until the end to discover why these areas still exist even after 100+ years of war. You will be shocked to find out what lies beyond these haunted grounds. World War I was the first industrial war where both sides tried and tested all kinds of dangerous military innovations. Whether it's the use of tanks for the first time or poison gas, deadly explosives and lethal chemicals were used on a massive scale. For instance, during the most prolonged battle of the war, known as the Battle of Verdun, more than 300,000 French and German soldiers lost their lives. In the battle that lasted over 300 days, an estimated 60 million shells rained near Verdun. Among them, 15 million did not even explode. Over the 4 years of war, the unimaginable intensity of shelling along the Western Front completely obliterated agricultural lands and destroyed roads, bridges, canals, and railways. With the bombardment so thorough, even the grass, plants, and trees disappeared. When the war finally ended in November 1918, the French Ministry for the Liberated Territories examined the war-affected areas in 1919. It divided them into 3 different categories based on the level of destruction. Zone Verte, green zones, lands with minimal damage. Zone Jaune, yellow zones, lands with heavy but limited damage. Zones Rouge, red zones, completely destroyed lands. Authorities cleared the green and yellow zones relatively early for civilian reinhabitation, as these areas posed no real threat. However, the red zones were different. According to an official post-war report, the red zones were devastated, with 100% of the properties damaged. Furthermore, reports indicated a complete 100% damage to agriculture. According to this report, it was impossible to clean these lands with no possibility of human life. So, after superficially clearing these lands in 1919, the French government declared them Zone Rouge. These red zones initially covered 690 square miles, or around 1,800 square kilometers. These lands stretched through the northern and northeastern parts of France, starting from Nancy through the devastated Verdun and on to Lille. You might be asking yourself why people could return to everyday life in green and yellow zones, but doing the same in the red zones was tough. Why was there zero chance of human life in these areas? Simply put, these lands were mostly the former front lines of World War I for over 4 years. Their landscape was devastated due to constant bombing and shelling of all kinds. These areas served as the epicenter of the famous trench warfare of World War I. Additionally, in this significant conflict, military forces employed chemical weapons on a large scale for the first time. The large-scale, intense bombardment meant all types of infrastructure were now part of the ruins. The trenches further destroyed agricultural land, and chemical weapons poisoned the soil. Millions of unexploded shells lurked beneath the surface, posing a constant threat. Restoring these lands to normalcy was a colossal task, a task that the French government deemed immensely time-consuming and expensive. For a country recovering from 4 years of war, France needed every penny to be spent wisely for the foreseeable future. Therefore, the government devised a simpler alternative. Rather than attempting to fully decontaminate the 1,800 square kilometer area, the government judged that isolating these regions would be safer and more cost-effective. Apart from the devastation of land filled with millions of unexploded shells and poisonous soil, another key reason for creating these red zones in northern France was the immense amount of human remains. Did you know that World War I resulted in over 40 million casualties and 20 million deaths? To put it into perspective, just the Battle of Verdun in 1916 had over 300,000 deaths. Much of the area of the red zones was part of the front lines of the battlefields, where the fighting was the thickest. Hence, countless soldiers and civilians lost their lives. It was impossible to clear out these horrifying human remains, so when the war ended, unrecovered bodies remained scattered across the red zones. When the French government labeled such a massive chunk of the country's land as prohibited for entry, they knew there would be backlash for this decision. And so, it came mainly from the farmers and natives who owned, inhabited, and cultivated the lands. The farmers wanted to return to their lands now that the war was over so they could return to their fields and pastures for productivity and profit. Hence, from 1919 to 1927, the French government went on a deep contamination of the red zones. As a result of this effort, they successfully cleared out 70% of the red zones by 1927. What remained of the red zones was just 190 square miles, which equated to around 490 square kilometers. Although the government declared a large section of the red zones cleared for civilians to re-inhabit, they were unsuccessful in clearing out the poisonous soil as well as removing all the shells from those areas. Hence, gases, acids, and other chemicals polluted the ground, and nothing grew in some parts of the red zones. The devastating impacts of World War I continue to haunt northern France, where parts of the established red zones remain. Today, the government has reduced the red zone archipelago to only 40 square miles, or 100 square kilometers, approximately equivalent to the size of the city of Paris. Farmers now cultivate former red zone areas, which still contain many unexploded shells. According to official statistics, every year, farmers find 900 tons of unexploded material in the area of former red zones. Sécurité Civile, a French government agency known as the Direction Générale de la Sécurité Civile et de la Gestion des Crises, DGSCGC, responsible for civil security and crisis management, is in charge of safely removing unexploded shells. The magnitude of the unexploded shells remaining in France is so enormous that, at this rate, it can take up to 700 years to completely get rid of all the unexploded bullets and grenades from French soil. According to biologists, some parts of the red zones are where gases, acids, toxins, and other chemicals pollute entirely the soil. Even grass, plants, and trees cannot grow in those areas. However, there are some lesser affected areas where the soil has grown plants. Yet, biologists report a lack of floral and faunal diversity. Simply put, there is no variety of plants or animals in that area. So, how long will it take for the soil to eradicate the pollution? Some estimates say it may take as many as 10,000 years to clear. Some experts even state it is impossible to clear the whole battlefield, and it is easy to understand why. The places that used to be battle zones still affect the people living there today. For instance, in 2012, France had to stop 544 municipalities from drinking locally sourced water, as it contained high levels of perchlorate, a World War I ammo chemical. Former battlefield zones were close to all the prohibited areas. Moreover, experts warned the locals against using wood from the former red zone areas. The wood contains toxins, and consuming mushrooms, game meat, or food cooked over such wood can be dangerous. Additionally, the relatively elevated lead levels in certain French wines may result from the wood of the barrels they matured in, from oak harvested in former red zones. More than 100 years ago, World War I ended, but its effects are still felt in northern France. An area as big as Paris bears the burden of actions from a long time ago. In the red zones of northern France, there's a harsh reality that challenges how we think about progress. It makes us face the lasting damage done to both the land and people's spirits. These zones remind us of the impact of past violence, showing that the aftermath still affects the landscape. Exploring these red zones, you discover a truth that goes beyond time. It shows how the past is connected to the present. The scars on the land tell a story of resilience and memory. Thinking about this historical disaster, we see that the effects of modern wars go beyond just the battlefield. They affect people's health and the environment, teaching us a lesson about the wide-reaching consequences of conflict. The silent landscapes left by World War I ask us to recognize how human actions create a ripple effect, highlighting the importance of working together for peace and preservation.